if you want to get good at something, you need to learn about it. What is a good leader? How do you become a good leader? And you need to learn by doing it as well. People are scared of leadership, but you can become a good leader. You just need time in a position. You need some support around you, and you can be molded into a very good leader.
We have a choice. We can put people down or we can help lift them up. Someone who knows too well the effects of being put down, bullied, and told they'd never amount to anything is this week's guest. As the author of Easy Target, Taming the Black Dog, a long-time host of his own podcast, True Blue Conversations, and a long-time volunteer firefighter with the New South Wales Rural Fire Brigade, I'm in awe of Adam Blum's willingness to share his journey and reflections with such rawness and vulnerability, reminding each and every one of us that we're never alone and that there is always help out there.
Mate, this is what it's all about, starting a conversation, getting people to feel that they can be vulnerable. By breaking down that stigma, we can absolutely save more lives, and that's what it's all about.
Before we begin today's episode, we want to advise listeners that this conversation contains discussions about mental health, depression, and suicide, which some may find distressing. If you or someone you know is struggling with these issues, we encourage you to seek professional help. In Australia, if it's an emergency, call 000. To talk with someone, there's plenty of amazing organisations ready to support you, such as Lifeline on 13 11 14 or Beyond Blue on 1300 224 636. Please take care while listening and remember that it's okay to pause or stop the episode if needed. Sensitive topics and conversations call for us to practice self-care. Your well-being is the most important thing. Adam, welcome to Share.
Thanks, mate. It's an absolute honour and a privilege to be here, so thank you for the invite.
Awesome. I'm fired up for the episode and know that, I've looked into some of your story. Can't wait to kind of delve into that a little bit more for you to share it, the reflections and obviously, provide some impact. I know you provide a lot of impact with your speaking and obviously your book and the work that you do, but, obviously providing some impact for the listeners on this episode. We're going to talk some pretty vulnerable stuff, but some pretty important stuff. So, looking forward to it.
Absolutely, mate. No, thank you. It's, mate, this is what it's all about, starting a conversation and, getting people to feel that they can be vulnerable. And the more people that we, by breaking down that stigma, we can absolutely, save more lives. And that's what it's all about.
Yeah. And the interesting thing with, the lack of vulnerability, especially from a male perspective, is how much the generations affect that, right? So, how we're providing for our kids and our grandkids and great-grandkids and all that, we can have impact now that will have impact in generations to come.
Absolutely. Absolutely, mate.
So let's dive into your story, Adam.
Sure, mate. Where would you like to start?
Mate, the start is always once upon a time, somewhere in the beginning.
Yeah, no, mate, more than happy to. So, for your listeners, my name's Adam. I had a pretty normal childhood up until the age of 6, where I was actually diagnosed with ADHD and with learning difficulties. And in 2024, it's not such a big it's not such a big deal as it was 25 years ago. And 25 years ago, we didn't know much about ADHD, and I was ostracized straight away from my teachers. I was laughed at by my peers, and it was a really confusing and challenging time for myself because I would just get put in the naughty corner all the time and like for simply just trying to, be a kid. And it was a really hard childhood actually. And I was put, as I said, laughed at, was told that I'd amount to nothing in life by my year 6 teacher. That was his parting gift. I was severely bullied. And as you can see, I've got a red beard, and I don't have hair now, but I used to have red hair, and I was bullied because of that red hair, and like severely bullied. And I was a bigger kid as well, so try fitting in, being fat, having freckles and red hair, and then on top of it, try having ADHD.
You're talking my story, brother. You're talking my story.
100%, mate. It was hard.
We can trade names. Like we can
Exactly.
we can go through names of what we were called in school. That's for sure.
Oh, Ranger, freckle-faced fart machine from Kmart, which that chapter appeared in my book many years later, and it still makes no sense to me today. I like because Target had the red dot, so I don't actually understand the freckle-faced fart machine from Kmart. But okay, yep, that was just something that they called me,
If at
and
anything, it's creative.
well, yeah, that's exactly right, mate. Exactly. It was, but at the time, look, intellectually, I wasn't there as a kid. I'll admit that now. I really did struggle, and I was, as my book states, an easy target. And it wasn't until I've matured later on in life that my intellect caught up, and now I call out bullies. But yeah, back then, no, I wasn't. And mate, I'll be vulnerable here. I also was born with one testicle, so I was so that was one that the kids, they called me one nut. So, and that caused a lot of embarrassment going to the toilet as a kid, and I would try and hide away from all the other kids, and that was really challenging because I knew I was different. Like, I already knew I was different by having the ADHD and red hair, and but to put that on top as well, it was just, oh great, yep, righto. What else do you want to throw at me? But I've learned, in later life that I'm not a victim. I'm absolutely not a victim. Everything that I have learnt through my journey and my experiences have made me the person and shaped who I am today. So yeah, went through primary school, went into high school, same thing, started putting on a bit more weight, and I used to comfort eat a lot. So, because I had such a low self-esteem, I would just comfort eat and comfort eat and comfort eat, and just I kept getting bigger and bigger, and I was told by my teachers that I would amount to nothing in high school as well. So, after a while, when you're told this, you actually believe it, and you just believe what you're being told. You just, you believe that you are going to amount to nothing in life. And so that continued right through high school. I had a few friends, but I wouldn't say, looking back now, I'd say they were mainly just accomplices, sorry, acquaintances. And it was, yeah, I look back, and it was a really lonely period of my life, like right through, and I didn't realize that how alone I was, and intellectually, people that I thought were my friends, and we would joke at lunchtime, they were laughing at me, not with me, and I thought they were laughing with me, and it actually turned out that they were laughing at me. So my childhood was really rough, mate. It wasn't yeah, nothing was easy, and nothing came easy, and even to this day, things that I have, like things that I'm interested in, I really have to focus, and because of the learning disabilities, and the difficulties of picking things up. But I found out, as we'll get into the story a little bit later, I was also diagnosed with binocular vision later on in life, so where I only see half a picture. So yeah, it affects my hand-eye coordination, and it's so reading, writing. So on top of the ADHD, yeah, I was diagnosed with that, as so part of my brain didn't develop, and that was at 27, and it was yeah, that there was nothing they could do, because the ages that they could do anything was between the ages of 4 and 12, and we found out when I was 27. So unfortunately, my brain just found another way to learn on its own, and yeah, it sort of, it was like, oh, this would have been great if I had known this when I was a kid. And my mum still beats herself up to this day that it wasn't picked up, and she said, "I'm sorry that we could have tried to make it a little bit easier, but unfortunately, what we weren't to know." And yeah, you just got to keep rolling with the punches, and just keep shifting forward, and that's what I've done. So yeah, mate, that's my childhood.
And the reality really is that if she would have done something, you wouldn't be the person you are today.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that is yeah. And look, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and there's times that I wish, looking back now, I wish that I had of, uh, like I always said, when I was going through the worst of it, oh God, I wish I was smarter, or I wish I was this, or I wish I was that, or I wish I was popular, and hindsight now, it doesn't matter in the scheme of in the big wide world. I am who I am, and I do what I do, and it's as you say, mate. It's shaped who I am today.
Mm. So talk to me about, what was your first job?
So my first job was actually, so I was a soccer ref. I played. That was the one thing that I was good at, was soccer. I actually played Division One soccer, so I was a left fullback, and I actually went into the refing. So I refed right through high school and into my early 20s. So that was my first job, and I loved it, mate. It was great. Like I'd play Saturday and then ref Sunday, or vice versa, and I'd work both Saturdays and Sundays running the lines in the center. I loved it. And then I was actually good at it, and I actually got up to the Premier League level in refing. So yeah, it was actually, and so that was my first job.
Yeah, cool. And where did you progress from there?
So I work for my uncle and my brother. So my brother runs his own business now, and he is a wall and floor tiler and a bathroom renovator. And so I worked for my uncle. So it was his company, and then my brother started his own after that, and I worked for them for 18 months, and then I went into earth moving, and I did 10 years in earth moving before I became a firefighter. So what I currently do now.
Yeah, cool. So let's talk about your firefighting. How did you get into that?
Well, that actually, so there's a story behind that, because so when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a fiery, and I saw it was down at my grandparents' place, which we'll get into the story a little bit later of how my nan saved my life the day that I attempted suicide. And um, it was at her place when I was 8 years old. The Christmas bushfires were on up here in the Blue Mountains, and we were we were down there, and we were wetting down everything and filling the gutters and doing what you do as a grandson to go and help your grandparents and protect and defend their home. And I just watched these amazing heroes just pull up in the red fire truck with the sirens, and they jumped out and they bowled the hoses down the side of the houses. And I remember my exact words to my mum. My mum was with me and watched as they went down the side of the house, and I said, "Mum, when I grow up, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a firefighter." And so a few years later, I joined my local volunteer fire service, and so I'm an RFS firefighter. I have been for the last 13 years, and yeah, I fell into it, mate, and I've loved it ever since. And it sort of helped me in my really, really dark years. That actually helped me with purpose, and it was actually giving back to the community, and having the brother and the sisterhood of guys that were down at the station really got me through some of those really, really hard times. And so I often say to people who are struggling, find something like that you can go and give
Mm.
back. As you know, mate, um, volunteering is part of the solution. Like giving back is, when you help someone, it makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside, and there's something about just giving back to others is part of the solution. And that, I say that to anyone who asks me, how did you get from where you were to where you are? And a big part of that was joining the RFS, and I've been, as I said, volunteer for 13 years, and now I've been a paid staff for 4 years. So yeah, that's how I got into firefighting.
Yeah. They say that it takes a village to raise you, but I find, it's even true when you're going through challenges in life, it takes a village to kind of support you to get you through that, whether that's medical professionals, specialists, your family, your friends, people that you play soccer with, or, people in your workplace. It definitely takes a village.
Absolutely, 100%, and I'd agree with that, mate. And it's your tribe who you're around is, there's an old saying, if you hang around a barber shop long enough, you'll get a haircut. And as you can see, mate, I've had a few haircuts in my time, but yeah, but it is absolutely, it's who you surround yourself with, and it's like my parents were just the best parents that you could ever ask for. They were, they just what they did for my brother and I can never repay them for what they actually cared. And like they were like when my mum and dad put us on medication as kids, there was so many of the family and so many others, the friends saying you shouldn't medicate your kids, and my mum and dad stuck to their guns, and I really thank them because they just got us all the extra help that we needed. And without them, mate, and I had other kids that I went through high school with, and they were their parents didn't care, and they ended up some of them are now they're sitting in jail cells. And that was what we were told is like our neighbors told mum and dad that your kids will amount to nothing and they'll end up in jail. And to this day, both of us we've never set foot in a cell. So I think your upbringing has a lot to do with, and as you say, mate, it takes a village, and we had a lot of good support that were helping us you know, see that we were better than just, we weren't just drop kicks. We were actually, we just needed a bit of a helping hand through the first part of our life. And then, as you get older, you sort of make your own, the world's your oyster. So you go out and you create your own opportunities and chances in life.
Mm. So talk to me, Adam, about you had this dream to be a firefighter. Talk to me about the reality once you got into it.
Mate, it was nothing like I thought. It's nothing like the movies. There's yeah, far out. It's very, very different and very scary. There's the element of risk, and there's a
Mm.
high element that every time that I go out on the truck, there's that real reality that I might not come back. And that's something that there's a real fear. And if you don't have fear when you're going out on the truck, that's the day that you hand your gear in, because fear keeps you alive. And
Yep.
uh, it's yeah, like I think looking back now, like when I joined, I was 19, and I was just a kid and robust, and you see things and you deal with it's not a normal job. There's trauma involved, and you've got to try and um process that the best way you can. And when you're young, it's sort of you sort of bounce back a little bit better than when you get a little bit older. And there's but that's why now I'm such a massive advocate for first responders, and also talking about trauma and getting on the front foot of trauma, because if you don't get on top of it, it can get on top of you very, very quickly. And I had some, I've had and seen some things that have affected me personally. And I ended up, it was through a few veteran friends of mine that said, "Hey, mate, you really need to go and see your psych about this and talk it out." And I'm glad I did, because I was struggling there for a little while, and just certain events that I'd never experienced before. So it was a new experiences, and it was foreign to me. And I struggled to process what had happened. And after I'd gone and got some help, I can actually talk about it now, and I don't. I've dealt with it now. And so I say to anyone that is looking to join as a first responder, be prepared that it's not what you see on TV. It's not all glory. There is some trauma attached to being a first responder.
Yeah, I know I had a friend, and he was talking to another friend of ours, and who was looking at getting into the police force, and he said, just know anything you get into, police, ambulance, defense, any kind of first responder, any kind of emergency services, he said, there is no chance that you are coming out of there without PTSD.
Yeah, 100%. I'd agree with that, mate. Yeah, 100%. It's and we talk about it that there's a cup and it slowly fills up, and you've got to know. I'm very aware now of what triggers I have, and so if there's certain call outs now, I won't go. So I know that in myself, but that's 13 years of experience now. That is, when I was first, you know, when I was 19, I was like, I'll be right, mate. Yeah, I'm good. Go to every call out. But as you get, as you go to a few events, you soon learn, what you do, what you can cope with, and what you can't. And you just got to watch the signs so that your cup doesn't, it doesn't overflow and spill. And so I'm very aware now of what I can and can't go to. And that's a lot of, looking into myself and looking what those triggers are, cap and through the work that I do now, mate, I know that, I can catch those signs early, and when it's not at the critical crisis point of where I'm about to do something silly. So,
Mm.
yeah, I'm very much now, and I say that to any person that is thinking about going out, and I'd say to any young person, mate, who is thinking about a career as a first responder, go and get some life experience first. Don't be in a rush to join at 18 or 19 or 20. Come back at about 25. And if you still want to do it, go and live and get some life experience, because,
Mm.
it's not like you see on TV. It is real. It is dangerous. And, I'm not trying to scare people off if that's what they want to do, but people need to know the realities of what, being a first responder is.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of industries and a lot of occupations can make occupations and make jobs look fancy and make them all look pretty on the brochures to get the recruitment drive and make sure the numbers come in. But the realities of sometimes a job can be completely different from what the dream of the position was.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%. It's, and I take nothing away from corporate, people in corporate, mate, but, the biggest fear that have in corporate, mate, is getting a paper cut.
Yeah.
It's, and I don't say that lightly. I'm saying that, that things can go wrong very quickly as a first responder, and sometimes, they do. And no matter how much training you put in, there is still that risk that, you may not come home.
Adam, can you share with us, if you don't mind, and only if you're comfortable, but sharing one of your greatest challenges as a firefighter you've had?
Yeah, sure, mate. So probably my greatest challenge was when I first became a, crew leader and a deputy captain, when I was 26. And I remember going to the 2019, 2020 bushfires, and they were just hell, mate. That was just the season that was just unrelenting. And that was the first year that I'd actually become a deputy captain, and I struggled with, leadership for the first 18 months. It was really hard to, uh, I I had this idea in my head that because I'd been a firefighter for 8 years at that point, that my crew had seen me as a firefighter, and that respect would roll over into leadership. And it was the opposite, mate. It was the total opposite. It was like, I had to earn their respect, and I really struggled. And I remember my captain at the time pulled me into the office and said, and I was ready to hand the stripes back, mate. I was like, I'm done. I can't. This is just, I can't do this. Like, I'm not getting respected. And he pulled me in and he said, mate, he goes, I can tell you're struggling. And I said, I am. I'm really struggling with, what it means to be a deputy captain. And he was really good because he came from an army background and he said, mate, and I said, well, why does it why am I not getting the respect? And he said, mate, you've got to earn the respect. And he said, you've got to earn their respect. I said, yeah, but they've seen me as a firefighter for the last 8 years.
Mm.
Why is that not, why is that not continuing over when I'm in a leadership position? And he said, because you got to earn respect. And I went away, and that season was probably, it was most tiring season, mate. But I actually I went away and did what he said, and I actually proved to the guys that I could be a leader, and I learned so much about myself as a leader. I learned my leadership style. I learned that the team comes first, and that I came last. And as a firefighter before I became a crew leader, I was so my safety was always paramount. It was always first. Like, I always cared about my safety. When I became a deputy captain, my safety was last. It was all about my
Mm.
crew, and I had to learn that. And when you're 26, and there's no book to read to say how to be a good leader. Like, you've got to learn through your mistakes, and you've got to develop into who you want to be. And mate, we've all seen really good leaders, and we've all seen really bad leaders, and probably I would say, mate, and be very vulnerable here, for the first 18 months, I sucked. I was a shit leader. I
Mm.
was. And I had to learn a lot about what it meant to be a leader. And that season was, as challenging as it was, it was the biggest growth for me, because I actually, by the end of the season, I had all the respect, and every crew member wanted to jump on a truck with me, which is the ultimate respect. Is when I first started, people like, oh, they groaned, and it was like, oh, okay, I've got to change this. So, yeah, that was probably the hardest period of the whole time that I've been a firefighter.
There would have been a lot of self-reflection and sort of self-awareness that was needed in that time.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and I would always, and I'd go away and read, like, military books on leadership, or I'd read, and I started to get fascinated by, well, what is a good leader? How do you become a good leader? And I went away and started to, and like you know yourself, mate. You've got to, if you want to get good at something, you need to learn about it. You need to learn, and you need to learn by doing it as well. Like, people are scared of leadership, but you can, you can become a good leader. You just need time in a position. And you need some support around you, and you can be molded into a very good leader. And yeah, now I look back on those times, and yeah, I'm not like, yeah, I would hope that I'm a better leader now than what I was. That's for sure.
Yeah. So obviously your time as a first responder, that led you into starting a podcast.
Yeah, yeah, it did, mate. So that came after. So that came a few years after as I said, like, earlier on, I attempted suicide when I was 22, and so the podcast came a few years down after that, and that was that was where I started to rebuild and become Adam 2.0. And it was yeah, the podcast, mate, has been probably one of the best things that I've ever done in my life. It was backing myself, and now I interview veterans and first responders and inspirational people. And mate, I honestly, I can't believe now the people that I've had on the podcast. I pinch myself, like, I did a podcast with Joanna Griggs, mate, I never thought that when I first started the podcast, that I'd have Joanna Griggs on the podcast, or I'd have the director of the War Memorial, and former Senator Jim Molan, before he passed away. And some of these, like, veterans and first responders are just amazing, inspirational people. And yeah, to have them on the podcast, mate, has just, yeah, it's beyond my wildest dreams. And I never, it's the greatest privilege, mate. It is the greatest privilege to
Mm.
speak to these people.
Yeah, and to share their stories, like for me, I, I get to interview some amazing people as well on the podcast. And the interesting thing is everyone is just a person.
100%. That's right. And, some people get starstruck and you sit there and as the celebrity or, like people say, they go, I'm just a person just like you. I'm just trying to, at the end of the day, trying to pay my bills just like you are. And, I've just got a little bit more of a status and that's all it is, mate. It's just a status. And, so yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. So tell me, what are some reflections that you've had through the podcast?
I've had a lot of reflections made of people that have that a lot of veterans and first responders struggle with transition when they leave the job that they've
Mm,
invested so much time and effort into their chosen career and some of them when they're medically discharged they don't see it coming and I've found with over the 100 episodes or sorry the 120 episodes that I've recorded uh most is always going back to finding purpose again after service. And, because we all, as you know, mate, we all want purpose. We all need a purpose. We all
yep.
that's why we get out of bed every day or go to work or we have to have a purpose. And when that purpose is taken away from, well, anybody, I won't just say veterans and first responders, I'll say anybody, you're lost and you've got to try and
One.
find that purpose again. And that's been the biggest takeaway that I've learned from all the podcasts that I have done is that transition and finding and once you lose purpose, you need to find purpose again because if you don't have it, you're just lost in the wilderness.
Yeah. Well, I think you reached out after you saw my episode with Heston Russell.
I did.
Um, that was the first time you'd reached out to me, and I came across him chance meeting. One of my earlier mentors was running something last year, and he's like, "Oh, you should come along." And we've got some good speakers. And soon as Heston started speaking, I was like, wow, like he's gone through the defense. But for me, coming through my journey, and
Mm,
he talked about you got to find yourself, you've got to find who you are, and that you're not defined by a position, you're not defined by where you work, you're not defined by what other people think you are as well, right? But coming back and going through that, and he talks about his sexuality and how people after like 17 years of him being in the service, people when he came out people were like, "How did you hide that?" And he's like, "Because my goal and my whole purpose was to protect, you know, my crew and our country,
mhm.
and I was passionate about that, and I was committed to that, and that was far above who I was as a person, which made
Ah,
it really hard for the journey that he went through and some of the challenges he's had since from a legal perspective is that he gave everything for his country, for
mhm,
our freedom, right?
mm,
And to protect us and protect people that he was kind of in charge of. But he didn't get the same respect and he didn't get the same, love back, I suppose, from those that, he'd kind of put his trust in, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%, and, like, I know Heston as well, and he, yeah, what he's been through, mate, and it would be challenging to, be in such a alpha male, environment and to, yeah, to, be a gay, special forces, commando, like that in itself, mate, is a very it's hard. Like I couldn't imagine what he'd gone through. So, and he's doing, he's using his platform now to help others. And mate, that at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So let's talk about your book. Obviously, you're an author of a book, Easy Target, Taming the Black Dog. How did you find writing the book, mate?
Mate, it was yeah, well, it was, really hard, mate. It was anyone that says, write a book, yeah, it was hard. It was really, really hard. It was, sitting down every single day and just, you know writing was, as I said, writing's never been easy. Nothing's come easy to me in life. And so I had to get disciplined. And it was actually my mentor who's helped me with so much, Janine Garner, in my life, that I was working with her, and she said, Adam, you need to write your story. And I said, who's going to read? Who's going to read my story? Like, my story is nothing. Like I haven't, no, like I'm not going to do that. And she said, no, you need to write your story down. There's people that need to hear your story. And I said, oh, well, how the hell do I start a book? And then I started, actually, mate, I started writing it, and I made the mistake of trying to write it all at once and not breaking it down into uh, chapters and sequences, and going through my life. And it was, I was writing, and I got to 15,000 words, and I said to Janine, I said, oh, guess what? Guess what? And she goes, what? And I said, oh, I've written my book. And she goes, oh, how many words have you got? I said, oh, 15,000. She goes, yeah, keep going. And I'm like, hang on, what do you mean keep going? Like, that's it. And she goes, you need to keep going. And it was interesting because she probably gave me the best advice that I've ever received, in that I was half-hearting it, like I was half in and half out. And I wasn't fully committed at that time. I was like, yeah, I've written my book, and yeah, this is what yeah. And I remember that she just said, Adam, you need to do the work. And I'll leave out the swear words that she used, but yeah. And it was the kick up the backside that I needed, mate, because uh, after that, I always went back to the why. Why am I writing this story? What is it that I'm trying to achieve with writing my book? And what do I want people to take away from my story? And I always would go back to that. And she gave me the best advice. She said, Adam, you treat your writing like you treat training, like, because I did a triathlon last year, my first ever triathlon, after I lost 66 kilos. Um, and she said to me, she goes, Adam, just treat it, sit down and write 250 words a day, every day. And I said, no, Janine, I'll do better than that. I said, I'll do 500 words a day. And I said, I'll commit to that. And mate, every day for 2.5 years, I just sat down and I wrote. And there was some days where I'd get thousands of words. And I
Good.
wrote on the plane over to Europe. I wrote sitting, and I missed birthdays, and I missed events. And like, yourself, there's sacrifices involved in anything we do in life, and any success that we have. There's hard work and there's sacrifice. And
Mm.
I had to sacrifice a lot in those. And I ended up getting my friend, who is a ghostwriter, who's written a lot of military books. I got her to look at what I was writing, and I just said, "Hey, can you just gloss over this and just see if you can help me? Just turn this into a story." And she's like, "Yeah, sure." And so she would help me and tidy things up, and get it readable and flow. And then she'd help me, and just yeah, she would just get it to a point where we'd start telling the funny stories of when I was in Europe, or talking about the suicide. And the it's funny, mate, because when you're writing a book on mental health, I was too serious at first. I was like, no, this has to be a serious, I have to be serious, like, we're dealing with a very sensitive and serious topic. And in the end, it was actually Brooke who helped me actually get and say, you need to bring some humor into this story. You need to, you need to make this funny, and you need to tell some funny stories. And so I did. I started telling some funny stories. And mate, if people read it, they'll read about the $6,000 night that I had in the Greek islands. And I say to any of your listeners out there, I now am an advocate of how not to spend $6,000 in one night. So, because I thought I was, I thought I was Richard Branson. So, that was, I just thought, yeah, why not? You're 22. young and, go for it. And, yeah, the next day was, it wasn't great, but I just committed to that, mate. And in the end, and throughout the whole writing process, I ended up, if I didn't write 500 words in the day, I learnt to give myself I was kind to myself, and I learnt
Mm.
to I just went, "Okay, today's not gonna be the day," and I wrote 250 words, and then I closed the laptop. And as I worked out throughout the writing process, any action is better than no action. And, so if you're doing 10 words or you're doing 100 words or you're doing, 1,000 words, if you're taking action and you're actually moving yourself and moving forward, that's progression, and
Mm.
that's what it's all about. So, that's what I did, and it was, yeah, it was hard, mate. It was the hardest, probably the hardest thing, bar my, gastric sleeve surgery, was writing the book and being disciplined to write the book, and it was hard. And then getting it to publish was even harder.
Before we get back into the episode, from time to time you might have a burning question, a guest recommendation, a comment, or some feedback, which I always appreciate. If so, I'd love to continue the conversation after this episode, so let's connect. I'm easy to find, but the best place to engage and connect is on Instagram, @TheSteveHodgson. But that's enough from me. Let's get back into the episode. Yeah. So obviously easy target, Taming the Black Dog, obviously as a mental health first aider instructor, there's two words, hope and recovery are two words that underpin what kind of we deliver as MHFA instructors. And it's what I instill into people to make sure that when they're in conversations that there's that feeling of hope, and there's that hope of recovery as well. So talk to me, we hear every day, in Australia, 9 men take their lives every day. 3 women as well. And it's interesting, obviously it we really, at the end of the day, don't want that to happen, right? I'm passionate about if we can save one, right? We can't save all of them. I understand that. But taming the black dog, some people can't. Let's talk about how do we tame it?
Yeah, sure. So, mate, that's why I wrote, Easy Target, was to help one person, and 10 people have reached out to me, and on that critical moment of, that I had a lady who was an ex-police officer who was, the day that she was going to end her life, she'd written her suicide notes, to her kids, and then something just stopped her, and she went down and read my book, and she got in touch with me, and she said, "Ads, I just want to say thanks." And it was a really weird conversation, and I rang her straight away and I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "No, I'm not." She said, "I'd written my letters, and I got your book, and I went down and I used the image, that I've got the image, mate, that it's, and any talk that I do now, I share that image because it's so powerful. It's, the book's in the sand on the beach, and I love the water and I love the beach. And I tell that story because you want to save one person, and to actually be at that critical moment and save a life. That's what it's all about, mate. And how we do that is by starting the conversations and getting people to, as we said before we jumped on, is allowing people to feel that they can be vulnerable and
Mm.
share, and know that there's going to be no judgment, and that, that most people that are struggling just want to be heard. That's all it is. They
Mm.
just want to be heard, and no judgment. And that is, mate, that's how we start. We start by, doing platforms like this, the podcast, or, doing, having forums or groups or sessions that people can walk in and know that they belong, and they're not going to be judged for, and everyone struggles, mate. Every single one of us has trauma in life. There's, whether it be childhood trauma, whether it be
Mm.
relationship, work, whatever it is, every single one of us has trauma. but it's how we deal with that trauma and how we, and I talk about it a lot in my talks, and it's post-traumatic growth. You can come through that, those dark times. The light, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and it does get easier. There's, I still have bad days. Like, I'm not gonna be a prior and a preacher and say my life's all roses and, it's all rainbows and unicorns. It's not. There are days that I still have down days, but it's arming people with those tools to understand that you can capture those, okay, today's gonna be a bad day. Okay, I don't know why. I've just woken up and today's just gonna be one of those days that,
Mm.
and but that's okay, because tomorrow when the sun comes up, tomorrow's a new day, and I love it. It's something that the special forces use every single day, mate. They use the every day is a daily renewable contract. It doesn't matter how good you were yesterday or how bad you were. Today is a daily renewable contract. So
Mm.
you get a fresh start. And every single day that we're on this earth it's a blessing, mate. It is an absolute blessing to walk this earth, and aging is a privilege. And I've really learnt that in my own journey of where I was 10 years ago, standing on the edge of a cliff wanting to end my life, to where I am now, where, like you, I'm in such a position to, there's no better feeling than getting up in front of people and sharing your story, and people get vulnerable with you in the audience, mate. It's the best thing ever, and that's what it is. It's starting that conversation, getting people to feel that they can start the conversation, and then arming them with tools and things that they can do in their own self care, because the mental health, as you know, mate, it's a muscle. It needs to be flexed every day, because if you don't flex it, it gets weak. It's, we go to we go to a gym to get a six pack, but our mental health, we need to be, we need to be working on it every single day as well. And mate, the hardest thing that I ever did was put my hand up and ask for help. It was
Mm.
the hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my life. But, and breaking that stigma down of it's weak to speak. It's not weak to speak. It's actually a sign of strength, and it takes courage. And, I've, with my psychologist, that's what I learned. I learned that he goes, Adam, you coming forward and actually realizing that you have a problem, and the problem is bigger than, it's bigger than you now, and you need some help, and there's some chemical imbalances that are happening, and we can do things to get ourselves right, mate. That was the hardest thing, and that is what it's all about. Is, and going back to what you said, is how do we do it? Well, people need to realize that if they are struggling, that they can reach out and ask for help,
Mm.
and that they're never alone. That's the biggest thing that I've taken out of my journey, is that there is always someone who is worse, who is going, going through a harder time than we are. But, that doesn't downplay what we're going through. But there's always someone who is worse off than what you are.
Yeah, yeah, completely agree. And, can relate to a lot of things in those stories, that feeling of shame and embarrassment and everything. Um, can you share what was your rock bottom?
Yeah, and it's interesting, mate, because people often ask me, when I wrote my suicide chapter in the book, they said to me, "Was that the hardest chapter to write?" And no, it wasn't, mate. It was actually the easiest chapter. And I say that, and there's no ego or arrogance attached to that, because the person I am now, where I was on that day, was that was 10 years ago. And the old Adam, he died that day on the edge of that cliff. He died. And the hardest chapter to write in my book was actually my admitting to my parents that I was, just before I attempted suicide, I was substance abusing. So I was using alcohol and drugs to try and numb the pain that I was feeling, and a day-to-day pain. And I remember, like, I was gonna leave the chapter out of the book, and my mum and a few friends of mine said, "You've gotta write this chapter in the book," and I I said, "No, I can't do it. I can't handle the shame of, what my parents will think." And they said, "Look, it's your book, but we really think, without it in, it's it completes the story and it shows how slippery the slope you were on when it led you to that point. And I remember ringing my mum on that day, and I said, "Mum, I've got something to tell you. I don't want you, I want to tell you before you read it in the book." Um, at my lowest point, right before I attempted suicide, I was using drugs and alcohol, and I'm not proud of that. I'm really not proud of that, but it's part of
But it was a coping mechanism, right?
it was, mate. I was looking for that high. I wanted that high. I was chasing that high, because I was in so much pain. And, it started with alcohol, and then that numbed it for a little while. And then I needed something more. Then I started turning to, party drugs. And then I never went to hard stuff. Like, I never went to needles or anything like that. It was party drugs. And I was just trying to escape. I was just trying to escape, and I did for a while there. I did. I escaped that the pain for a few hours, and then that was great. But then I started to slide, and I was in such a dark place. And it was that fateful day in 2014, that I decided. And I was at work. I was working away, and I had a boss who was just an old school Australian boss that no matter what you did was never good enough for him. And so I was 145 kilos at this point, and I was shoveling the curb and gutter, and I was working away, building a road for a grader. And the boss used to come on and drive on site every single day, and just watch. Uh, and he would just park up and sneakily watch all his workers. And, the bloke had trust issues. Like, I look back now, he had trust issues for sure. Like, you've got a foreman and leading hands and stuff like that are on site that, if you're not working, they're going to pull you up anyway and say that you're not working. But this guy, mate, he pushed his own son into a mental institution. So this is the kind of man we're talking about. So I was working away, and I remember I'd stopped because I'd been shoveling for a little while, and I just went to get my water bottle and have a drink. And all of a sudden, he comes screaming up in his Mercedes, Mercedes four-wheel drive, and just opened the door, and it didn't even seem like he put the handbrake on. It was like he rolled out of the car and just got in my face, saliva spitting, and, like, just red in the face. And he was just at me and he called me. I was already in that dark place, mate, and he called me a liar, a bludger, and a thief, and that I was a waste of space, and that it was a privilege to work for him, and basically made me feel like a piece of shit. And then so I was shocked. Like, I was 22, like, I was shocked. And, if it happened now, I tell you what, things would be very different now. I wouldn't get violent with him, but I would absolutely verbally go back at him now. And he got in his car, but back then I was 22. So, you're just a kid. And I was just a kid. And
You're still impressionable, right?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And so I thought, then and there, I was like, we talk about mental fog, and we talk about, that lifted as soon as he said what he said. Mate, it was those three words that broke the camel's back, and that was it. I just went, you know what? If he thinks that, and a few of the workers on site were like, as I said, I went back earlier in the podcast where I was the punchline of every joke, and during lunch and all that. And they just said, "Oh, you're such a waste of space as well. Why are you even here?" And so all of that, was building and building, and like a pressure cooker. And then, mate, that was the moment that I decided that, well, the world would be a better place without me. So I decided to that afternoon, I decided that was it. I was going to end my life, and I went and parked the truck up, and I got in the car, and I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I drove in complete silence. I drove up past my house, and it was a dark, gloomy afternoon, and there was nobody around at the lookout that would often be like. Usually, it would be just it'd be so busy, and no one was around. And I remember I was at peace. I knew that what I was about to do, I was just at peace, and I put my wallet and my keys on the bonnet of my car, and I walked up to the edge of the cliff and I looked out to the mountains for one final time, and it was beautiful. The mountain, they were just it was absolutely beautiful. Even though it was dark and gloomy, it was just beautiful. I I as I was about to throw myself off, the clouds parted, the sun shone on me, and my late nana, who I spoke about when we were, when I wanted to be a fiery, she spoke to me, and I know that was a hand of God that day. And she said, "Adam, stop, step back, pick up the phone, and make a call." And it was that moment of clarity that I needed to realize what I was about to do, because the drop was it's like a 180-meter drop. So, and I had my phone in my pocket, and I realize now on reflection that there was a reason I didn't put my phone on the bonnet of my car. And
Hmm.
I took a step back. I made a phone call to a friend of mine, and he said, "Bloom dog, how are you, mate?" And I said, "I'm not good. I'm standing on the edge of a cliff about to end my life." And he could tell in the seriousness of my voice that I wasn't joking. And he asked, and I'm often asked, do I remember much of that conversation that transpired with him? I remember the start and I remember the end. I don't remember much of the middle, but he spoke to me for 4.5 hours and talked me down from that edge. And I say it in all my talks now, mate, that when someone is ringing you, you never know. A phone call can save a life. And
Mhm.
so if you're in a position, answer the phone when someone rings, because you just never know, where they are or what they're going through. And I remember I made him a promise at the end of the 4.5 hours, and I spoke to him and I said, and he asked me again where I was, and I said I wasn't telling him. And then he said, "Do you promise me that you'll get help?" And I said, "Yes, I promise." And then I went home. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my brother. And the next day, I didn't go to work. I just didn't care if I got sacked. I really didn't care. And I went to the doctors. I told them what had happened. And then I went to, I did my mental health test, and I scored off the scales for severe anxiety and severe depression. And
Mm.
then started the journey, mate, the long journey of where I've got to today of Adam 2.0, and started to work through. And it took 3 years to find the right psychologist. And I almost gave up again because, um, you know, finding the right psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor is like speed dating. You've got to find the right one, and you go, "Oh, actually, we might." No, you're not for me. "Oh, no, you're not for me." And then finally, eventually, you get to one where you go, "Actually, we might have a bit of a coffee date." And
Yep.
and then I found mine, and when I went into him, mate, he was brutal, and he just said, "Right, we need to work through all your trauma and get to where you are, and get you better." And yeah, fine. As I say, like, people who are struggling out there, don't give up, because you've just got to keep going until you find the right psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor, whatever. Yeah, you've just got to find the right person that works for you and understands you, and you can be vulnerable with. And mate, that's what I did. And then yeah, that's the journey back to where I am today.
Mm. Do you still see a psychologist
Yeah,
now?
mate. Yep, every 3 to 6 months. I now call it the oil change and the rotation of tires. So
Yep.
every 3 to 6 months, I yeah, go and have a chat and just say, where I'm at, where my life's at. And but I'm a lot better at realizing the signs of when I'm starting to slide. And I've started to implement, as I said, we'll get on to the tools that I use to sort of keep me in that positive, mind, but I'm very good now at picking, when I'm down, or when I know that there's a change coming. So, but that's only come through a lot of inner work. That's come through a lot of work with the psychologist, and a lot of awareness as well.
Yeah, yeah. And it's tough work, right? Like I've been through it. And as you mentioned earlier, and I'll say it here as well, is that just because you've gone through a mental health struggle, and you're going through it, we're always going through it, right? We're always on the mental health continuum, and you slide along, you know. But the key thing is, and you talk about the tools, and I talk about, toolbox, right? You got to build up your toolbox full of strategies and tools so
Yep.
that if you're not feeling quite right, what do I need to do? I need to get a massage. I need to go for a run. I need to go to the gym. I need to catch up with a friend. I need to watch, one of my favorite movies. I need to read a book. I need to go for a jump in the ocean. I need to go for a swim. All these different things that you put in your toolbox that can change you, right? They change you in a number of ways.
100%. Like, mate, I do ice baths. I love them. People hate them. I love them. I love what they do for my mental health. And it's not just it's not just recovery for muscles, and it's great for inflammation. It's great for fat loss. It's great for your mental health. It's for me. It just puts me in such a beautiful state after I've done, and it's uncomfortable, but life's uncomfortable, and you got to embrace getting uncomfortable. And for me, I do ice baths, I journal every night, I meditate, I do visualization, I do gratitude every single day. I don't get out of bed until I find 10 things that I'm grateful for, and it just sets my day up. And I think for me, like, I often ask people, what's your daily routine that you every morning, what do you do? And most people say, oh, I look at my phone. Well, that's the problem straight away. Like, I don't. I get up and the alarm goes off. I hit the alarm, I get up, and then I go and meditate for 15 minutes in complete silence. And
Mm,
I'm in my own thoughts. And I visualize, I gratitude, do my gratitude, and then I do prayer. And for me, I'm very faithful now, and I don't hide away from that. I'm very, very faithful, and I know that, I know that day that my nan, I heard her voice. It was, as I said, it was the hand of God, mate. And
mm,
and because I've got work to do, and I'm not finished yet, and that's what it's all about. It's finding what works for you. Like, as you say, going for a ride, or going to the gym. Do what works for you. There's things that I do that people, they don't they don't like what I do. That's okay. Find what works for you. Like, I'm not giving tools that are, it's not all the be all, and this is going to fix
mm,
you. This is what's helped me get to be a positive and best version of myself. Find what works for you, and every one of us are different, mate. Like, look, some people are very similar to me. They like doing ice baths. They like exercise, and we both know, mate, through our own journeys, exercise is the biggest thing. If you like, you need to get out and exercise for 30 to 45 minutes, or even an hour every single day. You need to get out in fresh air. And what I do now as well is I ground myself. So every so often I walk out barefoot, and I feel my feet in the grass, and I just ground myself. And it's just so good to just ground yourself and just stop all the noise of social media and everything that, trying to keep up with the Joneses. Just, sometimes disconnecting, it can be like, it's a mini reset, and you're good to
mm.
go again. And that's, mate, that's what it is. And find what works for you. Like, I found what works for me, and some people, it's not going to work for them. But as I say to anyone, and any advice I give now is just find what works for you.
Yeah. Adam, you and I, we've been through similar experiences. We know the steps, but if there's someone there sitting there that's really struggling at this moment, they pick up their pen and their notepad. Can you just talk through the steps that you would take them through if they're not feeling right, you know, and they're not feeling quite right now, and how you would step them through that?
Yeah. So first thing is to, you know, be aware that you are sliding yourself, and sort of in that like if you are journaling, look at like and do a weekly summary, and see where you're at that, at the end of that week. And if you're still feeling, that if you're in a dark place, tell someone, like talk to a friend, a family member, or go and seek that help, that and make that call, and go and speak to a doctor, and do your mental health assessment. Or because as you know, mate, 9 people daily are ending their life, and getting to that point of where they they feel that that's the only option. And you and I have been there too. We've been at that
Mm.
point too, and it's, it's such a dark place. But bring that darkness to the light, and bring it to where it belongs. It belongs in the light. And and speak up. And if you're not feeling right, like do a daily, sorry, not a daily, a weekly summary, and or a monthly summary, and go, okay, I'm still in this hole. Maybe now I need to go and get some professional help, and just, get that little bit of help, or that I need, and just get yourself on the right path again. And then, then you can understand, as you know as well, mate, mental health is, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. Like, I wouldn't wish mental health on I wouldn't, mate, I talk about my boss, that old boss, that, I wouldn't even wish it on him. And that's saying something, because he pushed me to the point of, where I wanted to end my life. And I wouldn't wish mental health, anxiety, depression on anybody. It is such a debilitating, it's so debilitating, because there's days where, as you know yourself, mate, you don't want to get out of bed. And those are the days that I will say to people who are struggling, is those are the days that count. Those are the days when you don't feel like doing it. Get up and just have a small win, mate. Like, go and make a coffee. That's a win. That's how I started. I got up and made a coffee. And then I got out of bed, and then I made a coffee. And then the next day I went out and drank the coffee on the back veranda. That's a win. Then I went for a walk to the end of my street, and turned around and came back. That's a win. And then slowly but surely you start building momentum. And it's a small shift at first, and eventually that momentum grows and grows and grows, and you start to feel, you can claw. It's bloody hard work, but you can claw your way out of, the hole that you're in. And then eventually, mate, you move mountains. And
Um,
that's what it is. Like, that's what I'd say to anyone who is struggling, is that, be kind to yourself, but also realize that you need to, you need it. No one's going to help you but yourself. It's the inner fight. You've got to want to be here. Like, you've got to want to be here. No one else can do it for you. You have to do it yourself. And, we can all, till, we're blue in the face, and say, hey, mate, you need to be doing this, or, you should be doing this, or, but eventually it comes down to the individual, mate. The individual's they've got to want to be here. And, that's what I learned through my journey. And I hope that answers the question
yeah.
that you asked.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think one of the key things I'd add on to that as well is, like we talk about in mental health first aid, having a safety plan. And the safety plan is, knowing who you can call. And I think one of the key things is, especially for men, but also for women as well. But for men, it's an epidemic from a suicide perspective in Australia and globally, right? But, if you just pick up the phone today and ring someone and say, brother, if I'm ever feeling not good and I'm in a dark place, can I ring you? And if you're the same, you ring me, right? And this is the safety plan, these simple tips that we can know that there's someone there. But there's also, so many services and agencies, and there's TACs, and there's Lifeline and Beyond Blue, and
Mm.
there's, a long list now, which is great. But I think if we've got a mate that we know that we can ring or message and say, I'm not good, and they'll be there, and vice versa, right? You've got a safety plan in action that
Yep.
that if you need to use it, it's like a tool in your toolbox. You can pick up the phone or you can send a message and say, I'm not good, and that person will be there.
100%. And it's also too, I'm going to add to that as well, because, you know, any injury that like physical injury, we can see it. You know, mental health you can't see, and you don't know what someone is going through. We can't see mental health, and you know, and what might be what you might deem as, you know, funny, or might be triggering to somebody else. And you know, so always have someone, as you say, mate, someone there. And I often do it with all my mates. Is I tell them that I love them, and whenever I finish conversation, and some people go, "Oh, that's a bit weird." And I go, no, it's not, because at least they know that they're loved. And, you know, and that for me, I don't care how stupid it sounds, where I go, yeah, I love you, mate. Yeah, I love you, bro. Yep. And because eventually we all know where the end destination is. Like, we all know that we're not going to be here forever. And you know, I remember last year, I had it where a really good friend of mine tragically died. He was killed on a motorbike, and I was talking to him 2 days before he died, and I still remember the last conversation I had with him. I was talking to him about that my book had just been picked up by a publisher, and he lived in the US, and he said, "Brother, I'll be there. Like, you just tell me when the book launches, and I'll be there." And he'd flown in from the US for my 30th birthday, the year before. And right at the end of the conversation, I said, "I love you, bro." And it's the last words that I ever said to him was, "I love you, bro." And that I have that forever. That, you know, the last words that I ever spoke to him was, "I love you." And that's what I say to anyone, mate. And is what you say as well, is just tell your mates that you love them, and your family as well, because at the end of the day, just saying I love you to someone, you might just save their life.
Yep. It might just be the very thing that they need to hear today. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's spot on. Adam, can I ask you, throughout your life, what does success mean, or what has success meant, and what does it mean to you now?
Oh, that's a great question, mate. Back when I was a kid, I looked at success very differently to how I look at success now. Success back then, I always thought that you needed to be, you know, have the biggest house, the fanciest car, and and have millions of dollars in the bank. And it was, you know, what I saw from Hollywood, what I saw actors. I thought, well, that's success. That to me is success. And that's changed now, through all I've gone through. To me now, success looks like, if I've got loving relationships with my family and my friends, and I do things through love, growth, and connection, that to me is success. And I look at success now as, it's all about relationships. It's all about helping others. And, you know, it's not about money. It doesn't, you know, some of the wealthiest people in the world are the most unhappiest in life,
Mm.
and they throw themselves into earning more and more and more, and it's materialistic. So, you know, and how much is enough? Like, you know, if you get a number, you go, "Oh, I want more. I want more. I want more." And great example, mate. Look at Robin Williams. Robin Williams was the funniest man in the world, and you know, he wanted to be the best. He wanted to have his own show, and he had that. Then he wanted to go into, you know, he wanted to go from a comedian to an actor. He did that. And then he wanted to win a Golden Globe. He did that. He was doing everything for, you know, like, not gratitude, but he was doing everything for, like, to feel worthy. And eventually, mate, he took his own life because he was so busy trying to, you know, fulfill others, that he never fulfilled himself. And to me now, success, it's all about fulfillment, mate. Like, as I said to you, mate, I get the biggest, you know, when someone comes up to me after I've spoken, you know, at a speaking event, or have read the book, and reach out to me and say that, you know, you've impacted my life, and you know, you're an inspiration, and you know, thanks so much. I now realize that I need to go and get help, or, you know, thank you for being so vulnerable. It allows me to be vulnerable. Mate, that's success. That to me now is what
Mhm.
success is. It's not money. It's not fame. You know, it's about helping others, mate. And that's, I know now why I'm here. And eventually, mate, if I can just help one person, I've lived a successful life. That's what success looks like to me now.
That's awesome. And throughout your life, Adam, who would you say has been your greatest teacher?
Uh that's really hard. There's probably two. I have to say two.
That's fine.
My late nana, who saved my life that day, and my mum.
Yep.
They have been two. My mum and my nan. Were both nurses. My mum was a nurse for 44 years, and the last 15 years she was a palliative care nurse. And I don't know how she did her job. I really
Mm,
don't. And my nana was a matron, and they're both just well, Nan was a very, very special lady, and my mum is, wherever my mum's alive, my Nan is still alive as well. And my mum is just, she's my greatest teacher. She's, and a bond between a mother and a son, or a mother and a daughter, it's like no other love that you'll ever experience in your
mm,
life. And yeah, so my
mm.
mum is now my greatest teacher, and she's my greatest supporter.
What's the greatest lesson she's taught you?
Uh, to be humble and to treat people the way that I want to be treated.
Yeah.
That's exactly, like I treat people the way that I want to be treated, and it's through the values that my mum has instilled in me throughout through my whole life, is just to be kind and treat people the way that I want to be treated.
Yep. And one last question. If you had a dream podcast guest, someone that's passed or someone that's here with us today, who would it be that you'd want to interview?
Oh, that's, yeah, that's a really, really hard, um, that's a really hard one, mate. There's so many. I'd I'd have to say it'd be my late nana. I'd
Yep.
actually love to sit down with her, and because I was only 12 when she died, and yeah, out of everybody, celebrities or anyone like that, it'd have to be my nan, because her childhood was just what she went through, and she kept a diary, and yeah, just the way that she could have, she could have turned out to be such a bitch, but the way that her childhood was. But that lady, mate, she'd smother you with love, and you couldn't have met a better lady that would smother you with love. And everyone who knew my nan knew that they were loved, and she, don't worry, she called a spade, and she was tough. But yeah, it'd have to be my nan, and just get her life, because I recently did a podcast with my grandfather, so
Yep.
and he's 91, and to get his life recorded was amazing, and what he's been through and how he sees the world. But yeah, unfortunately, Nen passed away before I, even could do a podcast. But yeah, it'd be Nen. It'd have to be my Nana.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. And so for people that want to reach out to you, Adam, personally, want to grab a copy of the book, what's the best ways to connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I'm under Adam Bloom. I'm on Facebook as well, same, and I've got my Instagram with my personal page and the podcast page. So True Blue Conversations. But you can also reach out to me directly on my website, adambloom.com.au, and yeah, you can send me an email, and if you would like a copy of the book, yeah, just get in touch with me, and I can arrange that, mate. So yeah, I'm on all the socials, and yeah, and as I'm always available for anyone who is struggling, get in contact, because yeah, it's we're stronger together. And as I say, mate, it's not weak to speak. Speaking up takes courage. So you're never alone. And yeah, mate, the more that we can do this and do, mate, knock those statistics off, the better we are, and getting people feel comfortable. So always available for anyone who is struggling.
Yeah, perfect. It's always good to have other brothers that we can reach out to, and those out there that, are in the public eye can kind of reach out to as well. which is absolutely brilliant. We'll pop all those details in the show reel notes as well, with the episode coming out. And I just wanted to thank you, Adam, one, for reaching out and your support. It meant a lot for you to reach out to me, another podcast host, and say, hey, you're doing some great stuff. Just wanted to acknowledge you, and it was nice to have that connection. And now for me to interview you, to hear your story, your willingness to share it, your vulnerability. Just want to acknowledge the courage that takes, but also, kind of acknowledge the impact that you're making, and that you would have made, to the listeners of this podcast and this episode as well. So I wish you all the best moving forward. I look forward to connecting in person one day.
100%, mate.
And just thank you for sharing your story.
No, thanks, mate, and you're doing an absolute awesome job, mate. And as yourself as a podcast host, sometimes it's you don't get a lot of feedback, but mate, you're doing an awesome job, and what you're doing, you're part of the solution, mate. So keep doing what you're doing, because you are. I love your podcasts, and that's why I reached out, mate, because it's powerful work that you're doing, and the guests that you're getting on. So well done, mate. Keep going, and mate, I'll return the favor, and I'll have you on my podcast, mate. So
Perfect. Anytime, mate. I appreciate your kind words, and together we'll keep moving forward, and we'll keep impacting and showing people that they're not alone.
100%, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, mate.